Hello, sports fans. Welcome on in. It's the Down and Dirty Scott Mitchell, Herman Moore. So glad you could join our show. Like, subscribe, review, do all those fun things. They're very helpful, and we appreciate them. We appreciate all of you tuning in. Fun show today. I'm really excited about these topics. But before we get started, have to check in Detroit, Michigan for none other than the great, the wonderful, the wide receiver one, the guy who caught everything, Herman Moore. What's up, Herman? How you doing today?
I'm good, QB1. How you doing today? I'm a little down though. You know, the Pistons, man.
Oh yeah.
I know we're going to get to that at some point in the show, but man, that was a heartbreaker. And there were some comments that were made by the coach that I am going to want to talk about. Just get your opinion. I would love to see what the fans and our audience's opinion is of just his take on what he thought of the game itself and how he picks up the pieces and move on from there. But not to nitpick it, but there's some things that left me a little disappointed.
Ooh, whenever someone says they pre-qualified, not to pick at it, we're going to pick at it. We are going to pick at it. We're going to pick at a lot of other things, including a discussion or a comment that Anthony Edwards had about no talent in the NBA before he showed up. It wasn't taken too kindly from Magic Johnson. We're going to start our show off with our thoughts on some of the old guys versus young guys. Here's what Magic Johnson had to say about Anthony Edwards' comment about the lack of talent other than Michael Jordan in the NBA.
You made a comment about Anthony Edwards a while back, who had some things to say
about the old school heads.
Yeah, about the old school heads. And again, you youngsters, y'all better understand.
They don't know.
Come on now, just chill out with that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. You're gonna run up on one of these old heads and get handled. I'm just saying. I'm gonna run up on one of the old heads and get handled.
Yeah.
And I love the kid. I think he's talented as hell. But your comment back to him, I thought was perfect when he said something about the old head, and you said, you know what, I'll answer his questions when he wins some championships.
Right. He's the most exciting player to watch in the NBA. If you look at Anthony and you look at they're probably the two, and then of course Kyrie. Those are the three can put on a show.
Yeah.
You be like, woo, woo. What Anthony Edwards did last season,
man.
Phoenix, what he did to Phoenix,
what he did
to Denver, man. I said, wow, this kid here, this young man, he's just gonna go like this.
He's got it.
And then this summer, ain't nobody athletic ever been in the league, and nobody could jump and all this. I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? Don't attack all the old school guys when you haven't done your homework. First of all, there have been athletic guys. First of all, Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Kobe.
Dr. J.
Yeah.
Kobe. Clyde Drexler.
Yeah.
I can keep going.
Yes.
A lot of guys. David Thompson, even before all of them, could walk in the air. And so, bruh, you slow down. Slow down. And so I had to just hit him. Look, man. Talk to me when you want something. Because
show respect. That's all. Just show respect.
I don't want to ever go at nobody. Right. That's not who I am. Right. But if you're going to attack us like, oh, the game was not high flying and as exciting and so on, then I got to come back. But I'm still a fan.
Yeah,
and I still watch him because I love his attitude. I love his smile. He got great commercials right now. And so he's doing a great job. So I just want to remind everybody, it's still about one thing, and that's winning. No matter what.
All right. A lot there. I want to start with just the whole comparison thing from one generation to the next. Even the style of basketball, maybe a few years ago as compared to today. What are your thoughts initially on what Magic Johnson had to say about Ant?
My initial thoughts were he's spot on. I don't think you have to be a elite player, and you could only be an elite player with championships. It's a team sport. Championships come with team sports, and it comes when the team collectively does well. That's the only part that I think I would disagree with. Show me your rings, show me your championships. Not all the players are blessed to have teams that come together at the right time, that make all the right moves. The organization has to draft right. You have to build talent the right way. it doesn't mean you can't have individual greatness, right? We see that a lot. And I keep coming back to this thing with Barry Sanders. And he never had all these teammates, but he had excellence around him. He had some good players. He had some really outstanding players. He had leaders in their respective positions during the time that he played. Collectively as a team, the championships weren't won, but yet one player or a couple of players are able to buck that and say they were still great, regardless of the fact they didn't have a team. The problem I have with what Anthony Edwards says is that they don't know history. A lot of these young players come in, they don't understand the game. They don't know the history of the game. They don't know the history of the organizations that they are part of. They don't know the evolution of the sport. They only are about them, and they're only about the people that they're playing with in their time. And that's the only thing that they're judging by. But what they don't realize is that we've seen not only the players that we played with, and the talent that we played with, the rules in which we had to play with, which was more physical, which had much more talent. It wasn't the parity that you find even within the teams itself right now, where you can be the lone superstar and then teams are being built around you versus a collective, right? Jordan can't win those championships without the teams that were put together around him. Magic Johnson can't have it without Kareem and Cooper and all these other guys who are great defensive players, right? And so on and so forth. So I have a problem when these young players are not put in their place. And I don't remember coming in, beating my chest, or some of these other players that were putting down the other generation to elevate themselves and make it seem like they're God, right? And that's the problem I have with this. And I think he's right to call them out. I think we got to start calling these younger fellows out a little bit, because we understand what happened before us. We understand what happened during our playing time, and we understand how to compare that which we see today to what was yesteryear and the time before us. And yes, we can make a decision and a judgment, Scott, to say, slow down, fella. It's not as great as you think it is, and it's not the first time we've seen talent.
See, I agree with the part about history and not understanding history, because I'm not too sure that basketball today is more enjoyable to watch than it was back in
It's
the
not.
day. I'll just tell you, there was nothing better than the Celtics Lakers rivalries in the 80s and into the 90s. Like, that was incredible basketball. The 1992 Dream Team. Show me a better team. And that was a long time ago. That's almost 35 years or somewhere around there. And unbelievable talent. And Larry Bird couldn't jump. Magic couldn't jump, but Spud Webb could jump. Dominique Wilkins was a human highlight film. All these guys were. Dennis Rodman was a freakish athlete. There is no one who's better at rebounding ever in the history of the NBA than Dennis. Unbelievable. And it's uber talent that has to do it. It's not so much these offensive highlight reels. But the thing for me, and look, I might have been guilty of this to some degree about back in our time when we played, looking back in times, those guys couldn't play. They couldn't play with us today. I think that there's a natural arrogance that we have as players to kind of think our world, our time is the best that ever was, and that we were the best that ever was. I think it's just part of the makeup of professional athletes. But it's almost impossible to compare generations because of so many factors. One, you talk about teams, and you talk about the league and how it's set up and how the strategy was at a time. Basketball back in the day was about, we're going to feed the low post. We're going to feed, everything's going to go off. The center is a big part. The Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, and the Shaquille O'Neals, and all those great players that were there. But now it's everything spread out, and it's slash to the bucket and dunk it, or shoot a 3-point basket, or it's just a very different game than when it was then. And so it might showcase more of athleticism as opposed to what it was in the time. There's also other things. I think that training is so much better. There's just how to train, and how to whether it's nutrition or recovery or training or the devices they put on players and the output. You're giving too much output right now. You got to slow down, kind of stuff. And it's all good. It's not, I'm not ripping on it. I'm just saying it's just advanced. And it's like, the thing that I appreciate about the history of things is one generation builds a foundation for the next generation to excel on. And a lot of these players are gaining, they may not even know or understand some of the intricacies of the game the knowledge, the techniques, the coaching. It has an evolution. It's not necessarily different, but they've taken what's in the past and now they've used it to propel into the future. And it's like we're all connected. And so why in the world would you ever want to disparage another generation or another group of players just because they weren't in your time? There really is a lot of value, and a lot of where you are today was built on the shoulders of the people that came before you.
What the thing that Magic mentioned that really stood out to me was when he talked about respect. Where's the level of respect? That's what they're looking for. The older generation only looks for respect. They don't need the acknowledgement. They don't need the validation by the younger generation and those that are after them or anything like that. It is the respect of saying, listen, we understand that there's athletic ability now that's been able to be put together, unlike what we've seen in certain times where you just have a lot of good raw talent of players and athletic ability and the ability to train that and harness that and do those things. But what we see is that with talent comes the ones who can harness the discipline are the ones that really excel. And then there are those who are just really gifted and talented. And you can see that they cut the corners of detail and really doing it at a high level all the time because they're so gifted and they're so talented. They're so much better than their competition that they lose some of that. Whereas it wasn't, you had to compete at a different level. Now, when we say that, it's not to make the younger generation or this new generation of athletes and people and fans to say, hey, don't forget about us. Don't forget about the old heads. Don't forget about what we've done. It's to understand the foundational component that makes up excellence, that makes up greatness, and not let it get so watered down because people can then all of a sudden say, I'm great because I said I'm great, because I can jump high, because I can score a lot of points, because I can do all these other things. But they don't realize the dynamics that are at play when it comes to team sport. It is greater than when we see just the individual person running a 100-yard dash who can say, myself, my trainer, and my team, or whatever, that's how we got here. So when I look at this, it just took me aback a little bit and made me pause to say, to your point, why can't it be paying homage to those that came before? And also understanding that you're going to have others that come after you, that you're going to want to continue to create this narrative and this respect of brotherhood and family, to say, let's not forget about the path that's being paved and about the ability to look at these great players or these players who have the potential to be great, that we all come from the same place of wanting to win. We're competitors, right? We're gladiators and we want to go out and get it done. So I thought it was great. And then you're looking at Scott and you're looking at Johnson, Urban Johnson, and you
Right.
look at the players, man, it's I don't get the same feeling off of some of these young players when I see them than when I see those icons. I just don't. So that's why I think, again, we got to be careful in how we do that. So Anthony Edwards, great player. John Morant, talented players. They don't come without their issues. They don't come without their individualism. But at the same time, I think there's a bigger piece here. So I just wanted to make sure we touched on that. And it was a great conversation piece to have, because I know I feel some type of way when I get around these younger players. And sometimes it's like, they think it's the bee's knees, man. Like they've done it and no one else has ever done it before. And that earth shattering and life changing and game changing. And I'm like, no, you're not.
See, I wonder too, when you talk about where did that attitude come from? Because when you look at a guy like Magic or Byron Scott or any of these other players from that era, there was a certain way that they played basketball. And it's like they played every night, right? And they showed up injured and they played at a high level. And you knew that you were going to get their very best basketball at the time. And in today's world, all these players have come from some super league team or some team that they were a part of, and a lot of them are going to these different academies. AJ DeBonsta was at some school in a desert in Utah to go to high school, and he's from Massachusetts. And so these kids are, their whole world almost from their inception is about me and basketball and doing my thing. And yet when they get to the pros, we'll play a certain tempo during the regular season. It gets hard to watch. We'll have load management days. We'll do all these different things. And you go, I pay to see these great players play every night. And it didn't seem to be a problem in times past. And it's almost that feels like part of the angst or almost the, I want to say, disrespect that even a guy like Magic Johnson has for this generation. Even though he said, "Look, I love watching these guys and all that," he still was like, "Eh." He didn't appreciate what they said. And if anyone gets Magic Johnson upset, you know you've done something bad, right? 'Cause
Right.
he's about the nicest. There's never not a smile on Magic Johnson, even when he's mad at you. Like Isaiah Thomas, man, he's giving him a kiss on the cheek and smiling, but he's mad at Isaiah, and yet he's still smiling. So it's one thing that happens where I think it's a style of how these players play sometimes. But there's also, because I remember this, and I was playing for the Baltimore Ravens, and Lenny Moore came in, who's a Hall of Fame running back, and we actually talked about him in one of our discussions, and he gave a really frank discussion. It was not what we wanted to hear. And he was just talking about appreciating the time that you have. And he goes, I know looking back on my career, I could have done more. I could have given more. I could have been more than what I was in my career. And I thought that I would just play forever. I thought that it would never end. I thought that it was going to be this, I was on top of the world and I was amazing. And today, I don't know how many people even remember me. And I remember hearing this, and he was sitting because he was in a team meeting, right? Quarterback sit on the front row. He was literally right in front of me when he was saying this. And I'm like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. No, he's got this. Nah, and I really blew it off in the moment. And it really has come back to haunt me to some degree because he was really right about it. But the point is that it's really hard for us to hear when we're young. It's really hard for us to hear when, man, we're on top of the world and we're doing something so unique as professional sports. It's truly an unbelievably neat and unusual and a privileged opportunity to play a professional sport. And I think when you're in the middle of it, and I could say I'm guilty of that, I thought it would last forever. I thought, "Oh, no, I'm really doing the best I can do and all of these things." And later on, I look back and I said, "I'd give anything to go back for 5 more minutes. I'd give anything to go back for one more game, one more play, whatever." And it went by so fast and so quick, my whole career, that I'm just like, "Man, wait a minute. I've lived multiple lifetimes since my football career has been over." And I don't know that because of the circumstances we're in, we fully can appreciate, even if someone like a Magic Johnson says, "Hold on there, young fella. Wait, let's give you some words of wisdom." I don't know that Anthony Edwards would hear it, could hear it, or even cares if he did hear it.
One of the things that jumped out at me that you had just said was, I remember on Saturday or Sunday or during the week when these iconic teams and these legends would play, I wanted to watch. And as you said, they played hard. It never seemed like they were taking the plays off or walking up and down the court or overly complaining. And I could be wrong. I could go back and look at the film and I could be wrong. But I remember it just seemed like it had the playoff intensity that we see today was in the regular season. And then there was another level that hit the early parts of the playoffs. And then as you start to go further into the semis and then you got into the conference finals, it was a different thing. And then all of a sudden, when the NBA championship game came on, it was like center stage. It was like, these are the best two teams. These are the ones who have done everything that was necessary to go through the gauntlet of teams and trials and tribulations to be given an opportunity to be in that conference final and then ultimately crowned NBA champions. And now it just seems like you don't see that intensity until you hit the playoffs. And then when the intensity is not there even in the playoffs, and you can see it fleeting here and there based on home versus away, or whether you're ahead or whether you're behind, it's different. It's different. And I don't know if it doesn't get corrected, if it will ever be correctable. And like you said, it's gone on for generations, not just now. It's existed before us. Like, how do you send that wake up bell to say, you know what, you're not going to get a chance to go back and say, man, I wish I'd have played a little bit harder. I wish I would have gave a little bit more. And just to Lenny Moore's point, I've experienced that. I don't know any player that doesn't go through and go, man, I know I could have done more. I could have done more. And that is a tough regret to live with. I'm glad we had an opportunity to talk about that point. But yeah, it was just an interesting take on the old versus new guard that
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to end on this conversation here. It's going to continue, but we'll see where it goes next.
Yeah. I know this. We're going to keep talking about the players. We're going to give our opinions. We're going to get down and dirty with it no matter what. I got another one that I think is pretty fun for you, Herman. So Eli Manning, it just came out recently in an article on CBS Sports that he gave the reason why he did not want to play for the San Diego Chargers. Of course, Eli, if you remember, was picked number 1 in the draft, and it was wonky because it was like he was picked by the Chargers and then he was traded to the Giants, and that was a pre-draft thing or whatever. I don't know all of the down and dirty that went on behind the scenes during the draft, but Eli did not want to play for the San Diego Chargers, and the reason was basically over a meal he had in New Orleans. Of course, that's where he grew up, with the brass of the Chargers. And he said, we went to this hotel. It was a Marriott restaurant, and people were arguing we're in New Orleans. Why are we eating at a Marriott hotel? Let's go where the really good food is. And there was a lot of infighting between Marty Schottenheimer and the Spanos family and whoever else was there. I think it was A.J. Smith, who was the general manager for the Chargers, who did a great job, by the way, with assembling talent on that Chargers team. But what happened, so Eli complains. He goes, I ain't going here. And he ends up with the Giants. And of course, Phillip Rivers ends up with the San Diego Chargers. And I have a lot of questions about this for you. Okay, so the first question is, what would have happened if this trade didn't happen? Would it change the careers of Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers goes to New York? And you imagine Phillip Rivers is a guy that's never been able to keep his mouth quiet. He's just a chatterbox the whole time. He's a trash talking. And I can only imagine that voice compare. And Eli's not. Eli's very quiet. So I'm just curious, your thoughts first, because I got a lot of questions about this. But first, what do you think about Eli being in San Diego and Phillip Rivers being in New York?
I think it worked out the way it was supposed to work out. It's unheard of, obviously, and even at that time, for someone to say, I'm not going to go play here and then actually have that request met and handled, and then you end up in a place where you want to go, and then they obviously San Diego gets Phillip Rivers. I don't think you could predict what each of these players would have done or would not have done if they had gone to their respective places. If Phillip would have ended up in New York and with the Giants, and if Eli would have ended up in with the San Diego Chargers. But I do know this. It's an interesting concept to think about. What happens if players start to make those requests on a regular basis and make that part of the criteria, or this is what needs to happen before I make this decision. If I'm going to be a top 3, top 5 pick, I'm going to pick where I get to go. I don't know what my take technically is on that, because it's so many places you can go with that. If you decide to make that an option, or if you decide to say, okay, you basically get kicked out of the draft and no one can pick you in the first round. If you decide you don't want to go where I pick you because the team has earned the right, this is the way the system works, this is what's considered fair and equitable for each of the teams based on their previous season and how they ended up, then they should have opportunity for the best players. If you want to buck that and pick where you go, then maybe there's a way to just wait until the end of the draft's over and get your choice, get your pick. I don't know.
Yeah. The reason that I asked part of this question is you and I both know, man, it's so important to be in a situation where the system really fits you. And if you get with the wrong coach or in the wrong situation, it could almost be, you know, at the minimum limiting, and at the maximum like devastating. Like it can end your career before it ever starts. And I wonder sometimes how many careers have been cut short, have been derailed because of a player getting into a bad situation. Now, the irony of this, if you remember John Elway, he was drafted by the Baltimore Colts at the time, and he just said, "Look, I'm not going to play here." And he used the leverage of baseball to get around it, not just saying, "I'm going to take my ball home and I'm not going to play anymore." He said, "Look, I'll just go play baseball." And so he tried to leverage that. He says, I will never play in Baltimore. And so he goes to Denver, and he goes and loses a whole bunch of Super Bowls in Denver. And he goes, the system that I was in was limiting, which is ironic because he was trying to get into a good situation. And then, of course, Mike Shanahan comes on late in his career and he wins 2 Super Bowls and absolutely loves that system and being with Mike Shanahan and what he was doing, even though it worked out very well for John Elway in his career, even though it was still, there was a rift between him and Dan Reeves, and he didn't feel like, and he got to, I don't know, 3 or 4 Super Bowls. I think it was 3, maybe. I don't want to over exaggerate it, but it was a lot of Super Bowls. So I wonder, would you be willing to tell your son and say, hey, we want to make sure we go to the right situation here, or you, or whatever. And would you give that advice to your son? Because that's what Deion Sanders did to his son, Shedeur. And of course, Shedeur ended up, and who knows, did he end up there because of what his dad said, or did he end up there because of talent? But would you say that to your son?
I wouldn't necessarily get into trying to figure out whether or not a specific fit is good or bad for my child or for my son or whatever. It's like there's the opportunity. One is seizing that moment of that opportunity. That's one. Not to take it for granted. Yeah, you've had an opportunity to play collegiately, do some things to get the recognition, earn some accolades that make you viable to be deemed a first-round draft pick or a high draft selection. The responsibility that comes with that is that you are a multi-dimensional, flexible person that can be placed into any system and elevated. That's what the player has to realize. When you get selected and picked in such a high space and coveted like that by these teams, that's an honor. That is a rare place to be, because there's only 32 teams that are going to have that opportunity in the first round. And that's if every team got one pick and none of the trades have been made or picks have been given up. And you don't know at 20 some years old whether or not you fully develop, because you're playing at a different level. The NFL is meant to stretch you beyond what you were able to achieve on the collegiate level, because now you're coming into an elite category of players and systems. You're paying a lot of money, and you're paying definitely now money for players to be adaptable. If these players aren't adaptable and they can't elevate, then where's the value? The value means you get to pick and choose where you go. You get to all of a sudden build a team around you and put that all around. Who owns the team? The player doesn't own it. And I think that says something about the player too. Are you going to be a player that makes excuses for not winning because you go, the system wasn't the right fit? I get the system doesn't fit, but you don't know until you get there, because systems change. Coaches change, administrative people change, players around you change, coordinators change. All kind of things could be going on. So Eli doesn't even know if they're going to bring in a different coordinator to change out that system could happen. And so that's why I go, when there are controls in place, you got to trust the process. And I don't think we trust the process enough. I think things we put in place, and if it doesn't work out in the small window of time, and you got so many hands in the pot trying to figure out what is that window and what is that time, versus it being hard code and say, listen, we're going to give this 3 years. In 3 years, we need to have this definitive thing occur. If it's postseason play, if it's having a winning record, if it's changing the trajectory of where this team was going, all these things can come into play. But you need players to do it, and you need good players. And if a person wants to come out of college saying, I need to go where I say I want to go, I don't want that player. I don't want that player. And I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want to all of a sudden bring that player to my team, because now I know I'm going to have to fit their needs all the time. And if I'm not, what kind of headache am I getting into with that player?
See, and you wonder if that kind of impacted Shedeur Sanders, because Deion coached prime time, AKA all those things. He was clear as, man, these are the teams we're going to go to. And he was very vocal about it. And you have to wonder if some organization said, I don't want that. I don't want that circus. I don't want that mess. I'm going to pass on it. And maybe they felt like Shedeur wasn't this talented enough to warrant that. If it's like, man, if this guy's really good, if he's the number one pick in the draft kind of thing, we'll deal with the drama. But if he's not, he'll slide. Now, I've actually had other players who weren't drafted, and talking to them, interviewing them and saying, how'd you feel about not being drafted? And all of them said the same thing. It was awesome because I had options. And so I could be selective about where I went and really find an opportunity, because being a free agent, your chances of making it have dramatically dropped, and they can go up if you can get into the right situation. So most of them actually, look, if I'm not going to get drafted, or if I'm going to get drafted late, I'd rather be a free agent, because then I can choose the best place for me. And I don't know if it worked out for any of them. They probably still all got cut anyways, but at least they were in a place where they had a chance to some degree. And then your point, and I think it's well taken about, hey, you don't know how things are going to turn out, because you're saying this, and Philip Rivers goes to San Diego, and he's there with Drew Brees, and they got to get rid of someone, and so Drew Brees ends up getting traded to New Orleans. And you go, I don't want to go to New Orleans. New Orleans never won, right? This is terrible. And he goes there. He gets with Sean Payton, has this phenomenal Hall of Fame career, wins a Super Bowl. And I don't think anyone would have said New Orleans is the place you're going to do that. And I think of not necessarily quarterbacks, but Tony Dungy kind of turned around the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were an organization that I don't think was going anywhere close to a Super Bowl. And so, yeah, circumstances absolutely do change, and change in a big way, in a way that leads a team to a Super Bowl. So very well taken.
Scott, think about this too. And before we move on, so if a team looks at you as a player and say, you know what, you are a piece that we are missing, and we need you to come in and be that saving grace, that piece that allows us to get one piece off the table so that we can continue to put together this championship caliber or this competitive team. Wouldn't you want to go there? Because the team is putting the stock, the faith, and they're also giving you basically an opportunity to have stability, versus I'm going to go somewhere where they're loaded, they got all the pieces in place, they have all these other things. It's sink or swim. Yeah, you got to have confidence in your abilities and your talent, but those teams aren't coming for you because they feel that they have someone that's already comparable or someone that even matches that component. So your value is less. Like I told you before, if I didn't go to Denver with the 4th pick, it was Detroit at 10. If it wasn't Detroit, it was Dallas, and not Dallas. It's going to be Pittsburgh, not Pittsburgh. It was going to be Atlanta. Then it's going to be the Dolphins, right? So you kind of know you're going to go somewhere. And I don't know. I'm appreciative that I got picked with the 10th pick overall, and I made it work out. It wasn't the greatest idea. I came into a run and shoot situation. I wasn't a run and shoot wide receiver. I was a spread offense type guy. I played across the board. I was a guy in motion. I wasn't stationary. And somehow it worked out as the coordinators started to evolve and start to change, and the system changed and all these other things. They start to realize, put these pieces around, and all of a sudden you become the number 1 offense. And I didn't have to leave anywhere to go do that. So I just think that what these players are thinking that they're getting by handpicking where they go, I don't think necessarily the grass is always greener.
It's a funny thing because I was drafted by the Miami Dolphins and Don Shula, right? And it was in the 4th round. I wasn't in the 1st round. I wasn't the first player picked, but I was picked by a team, and I was picked by a legendary coach, right? And so they thought I was good. He thought I was good. And that has always meant something to me. That's always like the team that picked you, the team, because they all could have, and they all could have multiple times, but he was, and they were the team that did it. And it's meant something. I don't want to say I've always felt loyal to him, but there's always been a big part of my heart and my appreciation, because the same thing, I really appreciate this. It's an awesome thing to be a professional athlete, to do this. It was just, what an incredible experience. But I've just always been very appreciative because they did. They were the ones who stepped up and did it. And that's always meant a lot to me. So thank you. All right. Interesting conversation. I have a little news for you about Tom Brady. He started a new career. This is just me being curious about Herman and what Herman likes. So Tom Brady, the man about town, the man who won a bunch of Super Bowls, the man who owns an NFL football team, a little piece, he's just a baby piece of the Raiders, has now debuted as a model. So he was seen at the Gucci 2027 Classic reveal as a model, runway model, and sporting some hot leather, looking pretty good. And it got me thinking, because I'm not a fashion guy. I can't say that I've ever, and there are a lot of fashion's a very big part of professional sports these days, all of them. And the players are getting crazier and crazier. And I'm just curious, what's your temperature for fashion? Do you ever have a desire to go to the Met Gala or to, I don't know, the Kentucky Derby and show off your fashion expertise? Or would you ever want to, you'd be a good model. I could see her. Are you too tall? Are you too? Is there such a thing?
No,
Can you be
no.
too tall?
You want tall male
You want a
models.
tall? Okay, so you.
Yeah, male models you need. I
He
mean, think
knows
about it.
that.
The female models are already 6 feet tall,
Right.
Scott.
Yeah.
They're
Exactly.
pretty tall. They're
Yeah.
5'10". They're
Like,
6
I know.
feet. So they want the long legs. They want the certain build and frame and all those things. So as a male model, I think I could pull it off. I think I'd want to do the ones where it's about sophistication. It's got to be nightlife. It's got to be just really nice and dapper and suave. I don't want anything corny. I don't want to wear the outlandish, crazy fashion and that kind of deal just to get a wow factor so you end up on the front of a magazine. I will say this. When you think about fashion, you have to feel it. You have to own the thing that you're wearing. But I will say this: you said the Kentucky Derby. Would I want to go in and do all these things? Absolutely. I'd love to get sponsors and paid appearances to go and do those things. And if they want to outfit me along the way as I do that, so that they can get some photography and do all those things, I want to get paid like everyone else. Right? You're modeling somebody's fashion. You're elevating someone's brand, or you're giving them some type of an impression. So there is a little bit of a quid pro quo that would come with that. So you'd want to get something out of it other than just, hey, I'm just here, just wearing my own fashion and paying my own money, when you know there are those out there that will pay you to do it. Why not? If you have that clout, you have that ability. Tom Brady and a lot of these guys are in a very envious position for a lot of people because they can sneeze and find opportunity. And you think about it, just I want to get into fashion. All right, cool. I want to be on TV. I want to get paid millions, tens of millions of dollars to go talk about something that I played, even though I haven't gone through all the boot camps and all the broadcast stuff and all that, because I am who I am. I want to own part of this team because I've made enough money in a sport that I love, and I've been just, but it's got to be a wonderful life because everyone wants a part of you, and your brand can be extended so far that you can monetize it on everything that you do. Everything you do, people want to be a part of it. Think about this. You had mentioned a couple, I think it was the Kelsey brothers,
Right.
100 plus sponsorship deals. It used to be if you did more than 2 or 3, you were saturating your brand.
Right.
Think about that. You couldn't do
Yeah.
it for too many. Now it's, man, I'll do it for the local car wash. I'll do it for the local agency. You got your regional players, you got your local players, you got your statewide players opportunities. Then you got your national. Then you even got your international. And then you got your strategic partnerships, your equity partnerships, your JVs, and all these. I love the evolution of how we're now being involved in the monetary piece of it. But I think it's still limited, right? It's still, you still got to have a certain brand and brand value to have the appeal.
Fashion's not necessarily my thing, but I was just curious what you thought about fashion, and it's a great point. Maybe we should go. I think we should go to Fashion Week in Paris. The down and
Just
dirty.
to go, just to hang out.
Yeah, go to Fashion Week, see what it's all
Here's
about.
a question: if you had to be a guy, would you be the Old Spice guy on the horse? Could you do that? Could you be Scott Mitchell, the old fashioned, the
Oh
Spice
yeah.
old fashioned,
Oh
and you just ride it backwards and you're
yeah.
just sitting there? You do it.
Or
I see
Marlboro
me as the
Man.
guy.
Yeah, I
Right.
could
You
do.
know what I see me as? The guy that goes, stay thirsty, my friends. I could do that. Grow my beard out a little bit, put a little bit more gray into it, put on a nice little thing, give me a nice little cigar and a nice little beverage. And I sit there and go, stay thirsty, my friends.
He is the most interesting man in the world.
Yeah, the most interesting brother in the world. I don't want to be the instrument man. I'm gonna be the most interesting brother in the world. That's what I'm gonna be. The most interesting brother in the world.
The brother.
Hey,
it's a brother.
hey,
It's not brother. It's brother.
It's brother. Yeah, it's got to be the A on the end. If you go ER, brother, yeah, I got to be the most interesting brother in the world. Then all of a sudden, I'm gonna lose all kind of credibility. I got to be the most interesting brother in the world. And then stay thirsty, my friends. Right?
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, totally. Okay, speaking of thirsty, Detroit Pistons fans are thirsty for an opportunity for another championship, and the season ended. They obviously are going to go home vastly disappointed, and looked like it was going to be a great year. And some people might say it is, some people might say it isn't. Some people said this was an absolutely disappointing year for the Pistons. Should have been more, could have been more. I know you had a lot of thoughts about this. What say ye, brudda? See, brudda, that's the Polynesian. Brother. Yeah, got it.
Or
So,
bruh. If that works for you,
bruh.
maybe let me see if you let me hear you say bruh.
Bruh. Hey, bruh.
Yeah, see, hey man, see that rolls off you. Hey, bruh. Nah,
Hey,
bruh.
No.
Nah, bruh.
Yeah.
Or with you, I go, nah, dude. My dude. Right? All right. So listen. So the Pistons had an opportunity. They were number 1 seed in the East, and they had the opportunity to finish out at home after really battling with Cleveland over a 7-game series. And it's been up and down. It's been an up and down playoff for them. They had to struggle to get through Orlando. And when you could see some of the struggles and the inconsistencies with this young team under Coach JB Bickerstaff, and the thing that jumped off the page, not off the page, but off the TV to me the other day when I was watching the post-game interview, and he was asked this question. He says, "Are you disappointed?" And he in this team and the play of your team, and he immediately jumped on the thing on the defense and said, "No, I'm not disappointed. I have no disappointment in this." That's not a word I would use. And I'm going, okay, what other word would you use? Because to me, that's not egregious. That's not anything that someone's coming and attacking. I think disappointment was appropriate because it was a disappointing performance. It wasn't, you were at home, you have the crowd, you went and you took care of business on the road against Cleveland. You have an opportunity to finish out at home and you get beat by 30 points. You get beat by 30 points, and what you find is that your team has to come into, this is the playoffs. You don't need to have moments to get the team to get elevated. If you look at the Pistons of old, you look at the Pistons that have won championships, the Pistons that went to multiple, I think 6 or more straight conference finals. These are teams that come in ready to play the playoffs. They understand. Is it the youthfulness of this team that doesn't understand what it takes to be in the postseason, and that has to carry on from day one through the championship itself? And the disappointment will be not recognizing or realizing as a leader. If your team is young, you have to be the catalyst to say, listen, we're in the moment now. The urgency is now. We should never have James Harden out hustling us on defense. I want you to put that in perspective. No offense to James, right? James is not going to be jumping on the floor and chasing after balls, and he's not going to be running up and down the court to get defense. People who can't beat him off the dribble right now are not trying hard enough, because James Harden, everyone knows he's not going to play defense. It's not a knock. Film doesn't lie. And when he is out working you, and then you have their players coming off the bench and they're outscoring you, and you're at home, at some point you got to go, the intensity is not there. It wasn't there. For a game 7, winner keeps playing, loser goes home. It didn't sink in. It didn't kick in. The instinct of a leader, whoever that may be, even if it's Cade Cunningham, it's someone has to take over the moment. And then the rest of the team has to follow, not waiting to see if we can get momentum collectively. And then some, no, even if it's an individual here or there, someone's got to take over. And I just didn't see it. And that was disappointing. So disappointing and disappointment is appropriate. It's not a knock. This team has so much ability, and the upside for them, I think, is there. They still have missing pieces. You look at it, you get players playing well in spurts, and then you get the turnovers, you get the inconsistency. So when I'm looking at the Pistons and you're coming in as the number 1 seed, it reminded me almost when the Lions had home field advantage, first round bye, and a path and a way to the Super Bowl, and you lose your initial game and you're out, right? Yeah. It sucks. And so, yeah, disappointment would be an appropriate word. And I just thought that was kind of odd how you really defended that. And I'm like, dude, there's nothing wrong with being disappointed.
I think that kind of honest, reflective, like, hey, yeah, this is a disappointment is okay. I absolutely agree with that. So when things like this happen for me, like, first of all, you're the number 1 seed. That can mean a lot of things, because it can be a little inflated in the sense that during the season, you're not getting everybody's best effort. You're not getting a lot of teams having time to scout you and have a really in-depth game plan, because in the playoffs, you get more time to prepare for teams. And now they've played each other quite a bit. They have a pretty good sense of each other, and you have players that sit out. So during the regular season, yeah, maybe you have the best record, but are you really the best team? It's a little bit of a misnomer. And sure, you get the best path, you get home court, all that stuff. But it's just, again, a little misleading. And were they the best team? I don't know. I really don't know. And that's what's so hard about basketball for me right now is it's like there's the regular season and then there's the postseason, and they're 2 separate seasons and they're different. The other thing that when you're a team like the Pistons, who have been down and been fighting through the playoffs in these series and done a remarkable job in the comebacks that they've had, you're like, there's got to come a point where fatigue just gets you. and you just have an off night. And unfortunately, you can't have that off night in a championship, a closeout game. That's that maturity and that leader that you're talking about. But it feels like that's kind of one of the things that happen. You get a little bit of fatigue, and you get oh, whew, you almost breathe. And you go, okay, we did it. We went to Cleveland. We got a game 7. We're at home, and now we can relax. And I think just subconsciously, sometimes you take a break. And again, it's that youthfulness, that not having that experience in the playoffs, because you can look at Cleveland, and Cleveland's almost the exact mirror image of Detroit in that they did have the best record and they had an early bounce, and they haven't been able to get past opponents. You mentioned James Harden and how he was a huge asset to them because it gave them more than Donovan Mitchell as a scorer. And that was a huge catalyst, a big difference for them this year. And also experience, because I've seen the other side of Donovan Mitchell where they've had early exits from the playoffs when he was at Utah even. And so am I disappointed about the Pistons? And I'm sure the fans are, sure. But this is a team that's young and it's inexperienced in the playoffs. And I really believe they'll bounce back from this and be better. And it may require them to find, as you mentioned, and filling some of those holes that are on this team, because that you really, I don't know, you totally know, maybe the people in the organization do, but I don't think you totally know how good or how bad your team is until you get into the playoffs, where teams can really scout and really take advantage of your weaknesses. And you've got to have an ability to adapt in the playoffs. So it's a tough exit, but to me, I don't think it's the end of the Pistons moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have no problem with the chemistry or the talent level of this team. I think from a young core of players, the Pistons are going to be a team that in the East, people are going to have to deal with. They're going to be a part of that conversation. They're going to be a part of playoff series going forward. As long as they can keep guys healthy, they can keep things intact. I know right now there's question about whether or not a bigger staff's going to stay and whether or not he'll remain as the coach. That we'll find out very soon, I'm sure. But regardless of what happens, they have the nucleus of players. They can continue to build on these because their bench, I think, is solid. I think they have a good enough depth up to about 8 players that allow them to be highly competitive in this league of where the bench really matters after you get past your starting 5. But the concern, if there were one, would be how do you build a leadership to know that there's this takeover mentality? How do you play from when you're behind or you're down to continue to push forward and get through those tired stages? And who's going to be the rallying person to get the team to say, you know what, I'm going to carry you on my back until everything comes over. Cade has tried to do that, but at some point you will burn out the young player if he can't have that come from somewhere other than that one player. And then getting over the turnovers. It's just a lot of lazy passes, a lot of unnecessary turnovers that have plagued this team that has created the inconsistency. And these are things that they're not criticism, they're cleanups. They're things that you have to do as a coach, as a team, to be conscious of, to say, if we're going to go into that elite status and we're going to have championships on our banners at some point during our tenure, then we have to be a much more disciplined team. We have to be a team that doesn't have a switch that we have to turn on and off. It stays on. And then at the same time, we have to have that instinct. We saw this was a very physical team during the regular season. We saw the Pistons start to develop that, bringing back the old school bad boys type aura and attitude that really resonated with not only the former players, but around the league, as being Detroit's a physical basketball team. You come in the paint, they're gonna rough you up and they're gonna come after you. And I just, in the playoffs, it just completely fell off. And I don't know if what happened and who's to be accountable for that. I know the players are, I know the coaches have to be accountable for that. So that's what we look at as we go forward. I agree, this is a very talented team. The Pistons have a lot more left in them to go, but it's going to have to take a lot more than what we saw in these first 2 playoff series against teams that I think definitely they had an opportunity to beat. Cleveland, I will say this, is a team that I think was underrated, that gave them a great matchup, and it could have gone either way. I think they were just as talented in terms of the players that they have and the ability to run with them as we saw with the Pistons.
Yeah, and I think so much of it is that you can see it. And so you get in these, like you mentioned, they go, "Oh, these guys aren't more talented than we are." And there's a confidence level that comes from playing in those games and getting that experience. And the experience is in your mind. It's not, it's just, it's that believability. It's that this isn't something that's beyond me and beyond what I'm capable of. All right, let's move on. So I don't want to talk about the preseason, but I want to get your thoughts of the schedule. What kind of jumps out to you in that first little stretch?
I see this as an opportunity for this team to go uh, undefeated in the first 5 games, potentially, or at the very least end up 4-1. I
Yeah.
think 4-1 should be their low bar, and I think 5-0 should be their target in the first games of the season. And that's not looking past these teams. I think the Bills are
Right.
beatable
Yeah.
on Thursday night, but we always know what national games look like. National games bring out the best in both teams because no one, it's all about who gets off to the best start, who has the cleanest game, who plays more mistake-free football that ultimately wins those bigger matchups like that. I think with the Saints, they'll be getting their feet under them. They'll be trying to find their way. But when I look at these teams and I look at the Saints, the Jets, the Panthers, the Cardinals, and I compare them to the Lions and the stability that Detroit has, I give Detroit the edge in those games. That's why I go, these are winnable games. These are games that I think the Lions will have some challenges. They will have some ups and downs, but I think they're built in such a way and they've experienced it over the last 4 years. They can manage that part of the schedule to where I can see definitely where they can end up 5-0 or 4-1.
Yeah, so first 3 of their first 5 are on the road. What's interesting to me about this, and yeah, it's a very interesting take about where they could be 4-1. That very easily could be the case because you got Buffalo, a new coach, new situation. And when you have a bye week, or not a bye week, but a Thursday game early on in the year, and you have to go on the road, I don't know that's so bad because you haven't been beat up yet. It's still really early in the season. Maybe if you get a little bit later in the year and you got to come back in just a few days and play a game, but where it's kind of early on, it's one of those situations where the Lions could really make a nice jump or a nice run early on in the season, win 2 games in 10 days, and then kind of have a 10-day stretch and then have another couple of games and then have another bye week. It's a nice kind of a way to jumpstart the season. 3 of the 5, as I said, are on the road, but they're very winnable games. Really, all of them are winnable. Maybe so. Are you thinking that the Panthers is the one that will be the hard game that they might lose that one over the Bills? Is that what you're thinking?
I think the areas where they could potentially lose would be Buffalo and Carolina. I think depending on what happens with the Jets defense and if that's improved, I think they have a defense. They have the ability to turn
Right.
it on. I think Aaron Glenn will have them ready to play. Um, Regardless, I just don't see teams that can match them to where they have the balance offensively and defensively, and also the stability at the coach position. One question mark will be what happens with the offensive coordinator position and how does this offense respond this year now that they've had, again, volatility in that main position of this offense. And you got a couple of new linemen, right? You got a couple new players. You got Pacheco. You got some people in the backfield. And you really have to come out of the gate, and their offseason and their preparation coming up to this and being healthy is going to be vital given their schedule. And as you mentioned, 3 on the road in that first 5 games they aren't guarantees. I'm using this as a all things being equal. The Lions play well. The Lions play a fairly decent structured football game. The play calling's good. They're not beating themselves. These are matchups that they can win. Carolina and the Bills are the 2 that I see that could be problematic. Whether they beat the Bills or whether they beat Carolina, yeah, there's always slippage. There's always an opportunity to lose against a team you should beat because especially when you go on the road, you just never know. But if they could come out of that with a 4-1 or a 5-0, that will give them a tremendous start to the season that will build confidence. And we've seen what happens with the Lions when you build confidence in them as a team. They have a tendency to get on a run. And when they get on that run, they may lose a game here or there, but they don't lose 2 and 3 games in a row, typically under Dan Campbell. So that would bode well for them to get off to that tremendous start early on in the season.
Yeah, great starts are so important, and it is. There's some very intriguing games right there. I don't want to belabor this, but you look at the Saints, you look at the Jets, the Cardinals. They're teams that are trying to figure themselves out right now, and maybe don't have this same. You could argue that maybe with Buffalo and Carolina, still trying to figure things out. Is there a way that you lose the bye week? And I'm not saying this funny, but can you, what's the best way? You're in week 6, the bye week. How do you win the bye week is the best question.
Some people may not understand what when you and I are thinking that, can you lose the
Right.
bye week?
Yeah.
There's a lot that can happen. Players can get lost. It can disrupt momentum. If you are playing really well and the bye week comes at that spot, you almost want to keep playing because you have a rhythm and you really have it going. And you can take a step back because of that time off or that time away. And coaches aren't going to work you doing that because you're kind of working against air. You're really not, it's not the same vibe. It's not the same feel. However, in the same sense, the bye week come at a time that if you need a reset button because it hasn't gone well, I think this is a really good bye week placement for the Lions. And the reason being is before they get into that next half that we'll get over to, that next part of the schedule, that becomes a little bit of a run. And the team's got to be really, it almost like you got to be in that beginning of the season type health set and be a healthy football team. But you have to be seasoned enough and in-game experience enough and seasoned enough to be ready for that part of your schedule, because that next part of the schedule that we're going to go through gets a little bit tougher for the Lions. And they're going to need to be at optimal level. They're going to need to be firing on all cylinders. And then they're going to start to get into conference play as well as division play, which then really takes it up another level. And that's what we talk about basketball and football and some of these seasons or sports that have longer seasons. This is why football is so much coveted and watched, because games matter. All the games. You don't get to just kick the can down the road and take plays off and time off, because you will never be able to recover if you're disastrous early on in the season.
Okay, let's jump into the next. Shall we go to the next 4 games? Because that takes it all the way to Munich. So now you have your first division game against the Vikings, the Packers, which is home. And then that's followed up with the Vikings at home. Then it's at Miami. And then, of course, it's off to New England. And again, another short, it's not short, but it's certainly going to another part of the country. So your thoughts on those next 4?
The next 4 become really important, because when you look at playing the Packers and the Vikings, that's in division. The Vikings are one quarterback play away from being back into, in my opinion, being contenders and being a viable team in the NFC North. The Packers are going to be one of those teams that are going to come in as a potential team that could win the division. So you can't look past them. And then Miami, yeah, there's some changes that have happened there, but I don't think you can just walk through them. I think they still have to figure, they're going to be similar to some of the teams that are in that first 5 buckets of teams that we just talked about, where they're still trying to find that identity. They're trying to put some pieces together. But then after that, you got to go face one of the teams that were in the Super Bowl the previous year. They're not going to just go away. You have to fight them. You're going to have to face them. And I think they're going to bring a challenge to Detroit that they haven't seen, because how often do you play the Patriots? How often do you play teams that are out of your conference and out of your division? And that becomes a tough game when you haven't played teams as much. So I think that one's going to define, you can't come out of the first 5 games disastrous, because then when you come into this, you get into a must-win situation early in the season. You don't want to be in a must-win. You want to always be conscious of, you need to be winning the games. But when you get into must-win in that first 8 games of the season, you already know it's an uphill battle. We've seen that when we had to win 7 straight, and it's hard to do. That's hard to do in the NFL. It's really hard to do, to find that consistency to win that number of games.
Yeah, I think these games are really important, and they're all important. And that's what's great about the NFL, is that every game matters. You're going to get everyone's best effort. But in the division, especially playing these 2 teams, Green Bay, Minnesota, the end of the schedule is heavy loaded with conference teams on the road. And you really want to put yourself in a position. It's almost, I look at this season as, you really got to try to win as many games as you possibly can early on in the season, because the end of the season, I think, is a really tough schedule. And you just want to be in a position where you have a chance late in the season because of what you've done early on in the season. And let's face it, everyone wants to go after the team that got to the Super Bowl, whether they won or lost it. The Lions will be geared up for this Patriots team. Whatever happens with their coach, Mike Vrabel, will have been resolved by this time. Playing in Miami that time of year, I don't think is an issue with weather. Maybe the Carolina game might be a little bit hot for the Lions as far as humidity and stuff like that. But the temperature should be nice in Miami the first part of November, so that's certainly not an issue. I guess my only issue is the time travel, and it's not so much going, but it's coming back. It doesn't seem to have an impact on the players and what have you, but how much do you think home and away has an impact on teams today Does it really matter that much whether they're playing at home or on the road?
I think it matters, and I think it's going to matter the fact that they're just playing in another country in a different place. I don't believe that this is a normal game. It's not like normally traveling somewhere domestically across the U.S. and you're playing a team that's in the NFL that's in one of the U.S. stadiums. When you're traveling overseas, there's distractions. There's everything from how you travel to what you pack when you travel to how you want to govern yourself when you're there, and then still be able to be normal and take it in, because these players aren't going to be practicing 24/7. They're going to have some downtime. They're going to have some opportunity to go out and take in the culture, take in the other spaces. Those are all playing into the mental side of it. So there is a part here where the psychological piece, the discipline piece, the game preparedness and readiness piece, and to understand, and you and I, we've always been told this. Don't forget why we're here. We're here to play a game.
Right.
These are younger adults, right? They get it, but they're not going to just say, we're in Germany, so let's treat this like we're in Green Bay. No, it's not going to happen that way. We're away from some places. There's opportunity. There's a different fan base. There's different things that are to take on. You're traveling the world. You're being international. Those are distractions, but they're also things that can disrupt your game plan and your game play, depending on how they're managed. Then, as you said before, traveling back is a whole nother component that you have to deal with, not just the over there. And then when you get back, it's reacclimating. It's now settling back into what it's like. That happens because unless they were doing that all the time, there's not a routine way in which you do it. So I really think that the first 10 weeks of this season is going to be a make it or break it for the Lions. And depending on not only how they play, but the fashion in which they play, meaning, will this team play executed football, disciplined football? I hate the word when people say mistake free. You can't play mistake free. Will they grade out high? Will they be sound in their assignments? And also the other X factors, how will they be coached? How will the play calling go? How will they make adjustments to some of these teams that are going to throw everything at them? When you're playing teams that need to make their name off of you, they play differently too. They could play a little bit looser than sometimes what we've seen. And then this is a big year for Coach Campbell. It really is. And he's not going anywhere. But I think in terms of how he's perceived with the team, how he's going to be perceived with free agencies and free agents wanting to come here, and where's the status of Detroit going forward, teams want to know that this is still a solid organization and that there won't be volatility or exodus by some players as we started to see over the last year.
You talk about how they're coached. You talk this whole kind of middle part of the season, and it's the highlight clearly is going to Germany. But how the coaches prepare the players for the travel, how their schedule is, all the things they talk about, the right kind of hydration, all these things play into sleep. It all plays into everything. Consumption of adult beverages and whatever consumption there is. I'm sure there's a lot of discussion. There's probably a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but a decent amount of research, because there have been so many teams that have traveled these long distances that they probably have a good idea of what's the best strategy, because it is coming home. And so if we switch to those next 4 games, you have Tampa, which is at home after coming back from Germany. So you're going to be home the next couple of weeks. And then a really short turnaround, you're going to get the Bears. So what kind of fatigue are you going to get to those 2 games in 10 days? Is there fatigue from going overseas or not? Those games will be at home. And then you're at Atlanta and then the Tennessee Titans after that. Thanksgiving, big game, a division opponent. What's your take on this next section of the schedule?
So the next section I think becomes tough, because you're looking at 7 of the remaining games are going to be conference play, and then 4 of those 7 are going to be within your division. That's where we saw the playoffs start to really take form, and those that are looking at postseason positioning happens as you get down towards the ladder. If you've taken care of business early on in the schedule, they're going to be facing teams that all have the opportunity to potentially be sitting atop of their division. If you look at the Buccaneers, you look at the Falcons, you don't know who's going to be sitting on top of those divisions, right? They could potentially be in a position where they're trying to hold on to a spot. We already know that the Bears are going to be in contention. These are your division champions from the previous year. And as you go into Titans, yeah, they're going to be outside of the conference. They're outside of the division. But those sneaky games, they're games that sneak up on you. How will they match up? What is the status of the health of this team at that point? We've seen where the Lions got off to a great start, and then all of a sudden your defensive secondary goes down. Then you're struggling to try and find interior linemen. Then you got some offensive line issues. And then it's problem after problem, and it's putting out these different fires, and or it's making shift or surviving until certain players come back. If they're into that part, if you look at the back part of their schedule, the Lions have to stay healthy in the first half of their season, because the second half of the season is really going to determine where they land. And in order to get through that grueling part of the schedule, in my opinion, this has to be probably one of the healthiest times that we've seen this organization and we've seen this team in past years to be able to handle the back end of that schedule. Granted, it means the other teams have to be firing on all the cylinders too, and they have to be in a position where they feel they have something to win or something to prove as well. All these things are going to come into play at some point, but the Lions have to take care of business, and it doesn't get easier, man. I think the Buccaneers got left out. They're a playoff caliber team. The Falcons are definitely a team on the rise. They're a team that's built an offense. They're a team that has a pretty good defense. The Bears are defensively, there are some holes in there, but I think they're going to get better now that they've had a chance to mature. But offensively, their player here, maybe one player away from really having a rival offense, especially when you got a play caller like Ben Johnson as your head coach, but also the guy that's helping to put together what that offense looks like. So you have teams that have bought into systems, just like the Lions have bought into Dan Campbell, that they're going to be facing coming down the stretch.
Yeah, the real key to me is you got the division game against Chicago. It's Thanksgiving. I think that's an advantage for the Lions. They'll have that extra juice. They'll be at home. It's a short week. All those things that we understand that go along with Thanksgiving. And I think that's a bonus when you talk about that. It's so important to be healthy and to going into that final stretch, because we're going to talk about those last 4 games, which are brutal. I think it's a really tough schedule at the end for the Lions. So that's which makes this Thanksgiving game all that more important, whether it's winning it, but also how you kind of give yourself a little, hey, we get to come up for air. You get a 10-day break and you've got Atlanta, Tennessee. You did mention Tennessee as being one of those games where you go, watch out for that one, because you've come through this tough schedule. You get through Thanksgiving, Chicago, all that stuff, and you go, okay, we got a nice winnable one right here before we get into these really important games. If there's ever a trap game, that certainly might be one there. So now we get into the last 4 weeks of the season, and this is just cruel and unusual punishment. And it's like someone does not like the Detroit Lions. 3 of the 4 games are on the road. 3 of the 4 games are division opponents. All 3 division opponents are on the road. And then, of course, you've squeaked in there the New York Giants. So you've got the Vikings at week 15, the Giants at 16, the Chicago Bears again at 17, and then close out the season with Green Bay at the end of the season. Now, the Giants game is actually a Monday night game. The Vikings game is a Sunday night game. So you've got a lot of national exposure. The TBA on the Packers game at the end is probably one of those. You're hoping that this is a game for division winning or whatever. It'll have some significance. So a lot of national exposure on the Lions late in the season.
Yeah, I really believe, depending on how these other teams are playing, but just really the health of those teams could be problematic. And this is the part of that stretch of the year that those last 4 games are really built on which teams are in sync, who's healthiest, and who's really got not necessarily the momentum, but the consistency in terms of how they play. A lot of people like to say the momentum, meaning, okay, they had energy cut from one game and they're bringing it to the next game. They were flying around and all that. No, it's how do you grade out? And I don't think a lot of people who watch sports realize your probability of winning goes up exponentially when you can have high grades, meaning you have sound assignments, you grade out, meaning you executed. The receivers were blocking the right people. They made the right calls at the line. These other pieces that we don't get to see as fans and people that are seeing it on site. You know how it was when we got back. You want to be at that 95+%. You want to be definitely over 90% in how you grade out. When you get down into 80s, it's really not that acceptable in professional sports. When you're grading down in the high 80s, typically most people go, hey, that's a B plus. No, B and B plus doesn't really get you there. It gets you the area of opportunity, but it doesn't put you in the dance. You have to have your players grading out in that 90 percentile or higher range in order to do that. So that means every week your turnovers are going down, your penalties are going down, your missed opportunities and missed plays, whether it be a running back not seeing a lane or being able to break tackles, or the yards after the catch, or receivers making sure consistently they're running the right routes and catching passes, and you're putting consistent pressure on your opponents, and you're getting turnovers defensively, and so on and so forth, and you're executing in the red zone. All these things come into play when it comes down to who's going to make it the furthest and who's going to be the teams that participate in postseason play, and then not just get into the dance, but be able to actually have an opportunity to go into the Super Bowl and win it. Comes down to those teams that are there and being healthy, sounding your assignment, coaches are on point, team doesn't have turmoil, is down at the lowest it's ever been, morale is high. All these things are the factors that make for a championship team.
So do you think that with this tough schedule at the end, a lot of games on the road, probably a lot of exposure nationally, but also tough opponents, and this is a grind here the last month of the season, do you think that helps you going into the playoffs? Does it hurt you? What's the value of maybe this last month of the season and its impact on how you do in the postseason? Aside from what you said, because I think it's very well stated about executing at a high level and grading out high, and just let the ball bounce wherever it does. But you're going to turn out on the positive end of that if you're doing that. But aside from that, playing these tough games, how does that help you going into the playoffs?
Well, the tough games, if you're playing the tough schedule near the end, you're going into postseason normalized versus all of a sudden you've had a cakewalk because you've gotten through the first part of the schedule, which was brutal. Now you've really just up and down yo-yoing, and you've beat some teams, maybe not as bad as you should have, but you've gotten the work done, and you got a false sense of security. You got a false sense of whether or not you're playoff ready and that you're postseason ready. So I think for a lot of these teams, you want to be having that crescendo where you're building into that competition near the end, and you're facing some of those tougher opponents, because ultimately, if they're considered the tough opponents, those are the ones you're going to face in the postseason. So you get to see how you stack up. You get to see what your competition is doing, and it gives you a precursor of how you can game plan, even if you don't win those games, but you grade out high and you do what you're supposed to do, and you just happen to get beaten by the better team. You can make adjustments and get ready to understand how do we offset that, and how do we close the gap of difference in terms of what allowed them to win versus why did we end up on the downside of that. So there's something I think to be said, to be facing a tougher schedule, to be facing better teams near the end than to coast in. And a lot of people may disagree with that and say you want to go into the playoffs healthy. No, I'd rather go into the playoffs a little banged up, but my team's playing really good football. They're not making excuses. Regardless of what's been thrown their way, they're figuring out a way to win in spite of that. And if you have that type of team going in, you got a team that's ready to play, and you're not worried about what comes your way. You're not caring if you're on the road or whether you're at home. You're not caring whether or not you have a bye at that point. You just want to play really good football. You want to play sound football. That's the team I want. I want the team that focuses more on that than worrying about the opponent.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And that's why I think that going into the early part of the season, it's so important to build up wins because anything can happen. And it's just tough to go on the road for 3 of the last 4 months of the season. But the silver lining is that it will make you a much tougher team and ready for the playoffs. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you can certainly turn it into your advantage. So love it. A lot to get excited about this season, a lot of national exposure, going to other countries. A lot of expectation for this Lions team. So we'll be tuned in to see what goes on with it. But it's kind of fun to take a deep dive and get some inside analysis on what a schedule actually means. So really appreciate it. Appreciate all of you. Thank you. I'm Scott Mitchell. He's Herman Moore. Thank you, Chrissy and Martin and all those other folks out there that make our job so easy. We hope you all have a great rest of your day. This has been the Down and Dirty with Scott Mitchell and Herman Moore. Until then, we'll see you then.